Hey guys, my name is Steve Guttenberg, and I am the audiophiliac, and today I'm going to tell you all about, well, pretty much everything I know about the new Bowers & Wilkins 800 series Diamond 801 D4 and the 802 D4. The 802 is the little brother to the 801. Still a really big speaker. They're both designed and made in the UK. Now, they're pretty big and they're very heavy. So rather than get them here in Brooklyn, I got on the subway, went to Manhattan, and I heard them at Stereo Exchange. And I got to thank the guys there, Glenn and Evan. They did a great job setting up the system and making me feel right at home. So what I'm going to do today is basically my listening impressions. So this isn't let's say, a formal review, but I'll get you the gist of what went down at Stereo Exchange with the 801 D4 and the 802 D4. So I have to also, before I get into the actual details, I will say that the new models, the D4 models, are distinctly curvier, rounder, more organic looking, maybe not organic, but more contemporary looking than the D3, which now looks a little dated. It's not that old, I think they're 5 years old. But the new ones definitely have a sleeker, more modern presentation. The 801 and the 802 share the same diamond dome tweeter. And the tweeter is mounted in a beautifully machined aluminum pod. It's sleek, it's long. Here's a picture. And that's mounted on top of the now iconic turbine head for the mid-range driver. The mid-range is a 6-inch continuum driver. And that driver has one interesting update compared to the previous generation, and that is instead of using a conventional spider behind the mid-range driver, there is what they call a biomagnetic suspension. And that is far more open, so there's less reflections off the back of the 6-inch mid-range. So it's much lower in mass than a spider, and it has fewer reflections. So it's an all-round improvement. Now, as for the differences between the 801 D4 and the 802 D4, well, that comes down to the woofers. The 801 D4 sports two 10-inch aerofoil woofers, and the 802 D4 has two 8-inch aerofoil woofers. They're both ported designs, by the way. Should have mentioned that earlier. And the cabinets are heavily, heavily braced. Here's what the bracing looks like inside the cabinet. I'm going to put up the complete specifications for the 801 D4 and the 802 D4 right now, but I have to point out one very important spec, and that is the impedance. These speakers are rated at 8 ohms, but they also have a minimum of 3 ohms. That's very low. So you need to partner these speakers with amplifiers that are put out a lot of current, that have 4 ohm ratings. And I would say, to be on the happy side, I would say 200 watts per channel would be a good place to start. The partnering electronics used in this review were pretty darn impressive. This big Mac amplifier, a DCS Bartok DAC, and a Luxman CD player is used as a transport. I only played CDs over the course of my listening tests. And I mostly listened to the 801 D4 because these are very similar sounding speakers. I knew that going in. So I concentrated on the 801 D4 and then spent some time with the 802 just to confirm that they were close cousins. The sound of these speakers is, well, first, powerful. You can just play these guys pretty darn loud and they do not complain. And their serious transparency and clarity just jump out of the deck, right? These are very alive sounding speakers. Feed them with the right amplifier and you will feel the music, definitely. And the resolution, the clarity is absolutely stunning. These are neutral to bright forward, yeah, I would say, but it's so darn clean and immaculate that you just take it in. You just like revel in the sound of these speakers. Now, I also spent some time listening pretty loud because they sounded good loud. I'm not a loud listener usually, but when given the opportunity to just crank it, I don't have neighbors to worry about there, right? I did. Not as loud as some people I know. I have friends that listen way louder than I ever do. But anyway, I was listening loud for me. and I was absolutely digging it, especially with this Tom York solo record called Amok. And it's very percussive. It has lots of deep bass transients. It's spiky. You know, the music is very intense and alive. And the 801D4 just let it, wash over me. It was very exciting. So Tom York's vocals can sometimes sound just kind of weird, He's just being weird to be weird. But on this recording, he sounded more into it, more organic, and well, for lack of a better word, operatic. His musicality in his vocal really jumped out this time. So I was really happy about that because I've played the CD before and I never had that feeling, but I absolutely did over the 801D4. When I started listening, they had the speakers set up kind of close to the wall behind him, and I asked the guys, Glenn and Evan, to move them out maybe about 2 feet, and I think they sounded so much. These speakers need room to really open up and breathe. Anyway, back to Amok on the 801. The bass transients were so fast. I mean, you just get these jolts of power and energy coming off the speakers that, wow. Now, I live with big speakers. I live with these Klipsch Cornwall 4s. And as good as they are, they don't do what I was getting out of the 801D4. That's like a whole other level of power delivery. If you want to feel it, if you want to have that live experience of just feeling it hitting your body, that you can get that out of this speaker, the 801D4. The next bit of music I played was this one from Dick Hyman. It's a solo piano recording. And it's extraordinary recording. It was done by Reference Recordings. The engineer is Keith Johnson, a true master. And the stereo image was such that it felt like there was a piano in front of me. The imaging on these speakers is, like everything else about them really, is very precise and clear. And the other thing that was great is the way I could hear Dick Hyman's touch on the keys, the dynamics, the subtleties of what he was doing. He's sometimes hitting it hard, sometimes kind of medium, just barely touching the keys, and you just could sense those dynamics. Those dynamic shifts were so well played over these speakers. Well, that's what makes it sound like there's a human being in front of you playing this music. It's not just sound coming out of speakers. No, it feels like this is happening now. It's a performance. That's what I was getting out of the speakers, a performance by Dick Hyman. The next CD I played was by Townes Van Zandt. And what can I say about Townes, man? The guy was not just a songwriter. He was a storyteller. He's telling us stories about people. I don't know if they're real people, but whatever. They're just great stories. And his delivery is just so human. It's a human-to-human experience listening to Townes. But the thing about this recording, the late, great Townes Van Zandt, which was weird because he was alive at the time, was that the quality of the recording varies so much from track to track. So no attempt was made to sound like this was one seamless studio recording. They feel very different. And the 801D4 really clued me into the differences of atmosphere, how close he was to the microphone, just how he was feeling that day. So it was really cool. So again, the experiences of hearing into the recording, you feel like you're right there with Townes. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference in sound between the 801D4 and the 802D4, because there's a big difference in price. They sound essentially the same, except, yes, the bigger speaker makes more bass. And if you have a really big room, I think that would definitely tip the balance toward, and you liked a lot of bass, that would tip the balance towards the 801. That said, though, I felt that the 802's woofers and mid-range driver, the blend was a bit better. It felt more of a piece coming out of the 802D4. So in a way, I actually preferred the 802 because it just seemed more seamless. It seemed like an overall more integrated design. But maybe if we tweaked the placement of both speakers very, very carefully, the blend would have been equally good over the 801 and the 802. So as I said, this is not really a review. This is just my listening impression done over about a 2-hour period. So this is what I got for you. I'm doing the best I can. There was no way that I could have gotten these speakers here. at home. Certainly not both of them. Anyway, I really enjoyed my time with the speakers. If you are the kind of person that you crave resolution, clarity, great imaging, killer, highly dynamic bass, in other words, a very powerful presentation and yet highly resolving, these speakers are worth your investigation. You should do some research and listen to them. Obviously, speakers this expensive, even if you don't live near a B&W dealer that has them, you should get on a plane and go listen to them. Because if you're going to spend $26,000 or $35,000 a pair, yeah, I think you should really listen to them for yourself. So that would be my buyer's advice. Or if you're not really in the market to buy them, but you're curious, I'm sure you'll get to hear them at a hi-fi show, because it seems like in 2022, we're going to be back to maybe not as usual with hi-fi shows, but we'll be closer. So you might get a chance to hear them at a show. My name is Steve Guttenberg, and I am the audiophiliac. Oh, I have to plug myself right now. I do have this podcast that is called the Audiophiliac Podcast. You don't have to have an app or anything like that to hear it. You can just do a search on Audiophiliac Podcast and you will get to my website. Or you can there's a link to my website that has the podcast directly below. But if you're a podcast kind of person, you can hear my podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, if you're still doing the Spotify thing. You can hear it on Google Podcasts, on Stitcher, on iHeartRadio. It's kind of everywhere. So if I've made you at all curious, I'd appreciate it if you take a listen. See what's up with the podcast, because they're not the same thing as the actual videos I'm doing here on YouTube. It's a different thing. If you'd like to help support the channel, I would very much appreciate it. You could check out my Patreon at patreon.com/audiophiliac, and there is a link to that below. And with that, I can say, yeah, my work here is at last complete. Thank you, as always, for watching. I'm grateful for you being here and supporting me. Oh, and by the way, just yesterday, a guy stopped me on the street who recognized me. And he was a tall guy, and he came up to me and said, oh, he really likes the show. And his girlfriend was with him. His girlfriend or wife was with him. And she was looking at him. He was so happy. And she was like looking, he was very tall. She was looking up at him, and she looked so happy. It was the coolest thing. So yes, if you ever see me on the street and I'm not like doing something that you wouldn't want to interfere with, yes, please say hi. I would very much enjoy that. So yes, now I can say my work here is at last complete. Thank you as always for watching, and I really do hope to see you back here again very, very soon. Bye-bye.